remote corners of Washington, far from the busy cities like Seattle or Spokane, there are dozens of small towns whose names are rarely heard. Many of these communities face a difficult reality: shrinking populations, limited job opportunities, and long distances from major economic centers make life there increasingly challenging each year. In this video, we will explore some of the worst remote small towns in Washington, places that still exist on the map but face serious challenges to survive in the modern era. In the middle of the vast, nearly endless wheat fields of eastern Washington, there is a small town so quiet it can easily be missed on a map: Marlin. With a population that does not even reach 50 residents, this town is often described as one of the most remote and fragile communities in the state. There is no real commercial center, almost no active businesses, and most jobs come only from wheat farming around Grant County. Household income in small towns like this sits far below the state average, while job opportunities for younger residents are extremely limited, one of the main reasons many eventually move to larger cities. Ironically, in the early 1900s, the town once grew as a railroad stop serving farmers across the Columbia Plateau. If Marlin feels quiet, then Lamont feels like the next step toward isolation. This small town sits in rural eastern Washington, surrounded by the wide wheat fields of the Palouse region. With a population of only about 70 to 80 people, Lamont is considered one of the least populated towns in the entire state. But what places Lamont among the worst remote small towns is not just its small size. The town has almost no real economic center. There is no commercial district, barely any active businesses, and most local activity revolves around wheat farming in the surrounding countryside. Economically, conditions are also quite difficult. The average household income in Lamont is estimated at only about $37,700 per year, far below the much higher Washington state average. Unlike the small towns scattered across eastern Washington's wheat plains, Conconully sits deep in the northern mountains of Washington in the remote region of Okanogan County. Interestingly, Conconully once played a much more important role. In the late 19th century, the town grew as a gold mining center and even served briefly as the temporary county seat of Okanogan County before that status moved elsewhere. But as mining declined, the town's growth slowed as well. Today, its population is only about 200 residents, and the community remains small and isolated. Most local activity depends on seasonal tourism, such as fishing at Conconully Lake and Salmon Lake, along with hunting in the surrounding forests. Economically, the town remains fragile. The median household income sits around $40,000 per year, well below the much higher average for Washington state. Stable job opportunities are extremely limited, and many residents rely on seasonal work or must commute to other towns. Skykomish sits deep in the Cascade Mountains, only a few miles from the hiking routes that lead towards Stevens Pass. The scenery is spectacular: dense forests, rushing mountain rivers, and railroad tracks cutting through the narrow valley. But that dramatic location is also the reason Skykomish is often considered one of the most difficult remote small towns to develop in Washington. Its population is only around 200 residents, and the community lies in a narrow valley along the Skykomish River. Access to the town is limited to a single main road and a railway line, making it feel extremely isolated, especially during winter when heavy snow often covers the mountain region. Historically, Skykomish was once much more active. The town grew in the early 20th century as an important hub for railroad workers along the Great Northern Railway route crossing the Cascade Mountains. In the middle of the rolling hills of the Palouse region in Washington sits a small town called Endicott, a quiet farming community that has slowly lost its role over time. With a population of about 280 to 300 residents, Endicott is larger than some microtowns in the region, but it is still very small, and its economy remains limited. Economically, the town faces clear constraints. The median household income sits at around $42,000 per year. The town originally developed in the late 19th century when railroad lines helped farmers in the Palouse region ship wheat and peas to larger markets. For several decades, Endicott had a small downtown area with shops, a bank, and local businesses serving the surrounding farming community. But major changes in agriculture gradually reshaped the town. As farming operations became larger and more mechanized, the need for small local service centers declined. As a result, Endicott's population has steadily shrunk compared with its peak in the early 20th century. Far in northern Washington, only a few kilometers from the Canadian border in Ferry County, there is a small community called Curlew. With a population of only around 120 to 130 residents, the place feels more like a remote outpost in the middle of the forest. It sits in a narrow valley along the Kettle River, surrounded by mountains and thick woodland. Curlew once experienced a much busier period. In the late 19th century, the town grew during the gold rush in the Kettle River region, when miners and traders arrived in large numbers. But like many mining towns across the American West, when mineral resources declined, the population also began to shrink. Today, Curlew's economy relies mainly on small-scale agriculture, nature tourism, and a handful of very limited local businesses. The median household income in this community is estimated at about $38,000 per year, far below the Washington state average. Next is Northport, a small town sitting along the banks of the Columbia River. Northport has a population of around 300 residents, but its small size is not the only challenge. The town is located far from major economic centers, and most local activity is quite limited. Many residents must travel long distances to other towns for jobs, healthcare services, or even basic daily needs. Interestingly, Northport once had a much busier past. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the town grew as a transportation and mining center for the surrounding region. Railroad lines carried ore from mines near the Canadian border, while steamboats on the Columbia River helped move goods and passengers. Today, the median household income is around $45,000 per year, still well below the Washington state average. Across the wide plains of eastern Washington lies Wilbur. With a population of about 800 residents, Wilbur is slightly larger than many other remote towns in this region. The town sits on the Columbia Plateau, a dry agricultural area that has been a major wheat-producing region for more than a century. Wilbur developed in the late 1800s as a trade center for farmers throughout the surrounding countryside. Shops, grain warehouses, and transportation routes once made Wilbur an important local economic hub. Today, Wilbur's economy still depends heavily on wheat farming and small local businesses. The median household income in the town is estimated at about $47,000 per year, noticeably below the Washington state average. In the southeastern corner of Washington stands the small town of Pomeroy. With a population of about 1,300 to 1,400 residents, the town is larger than many other remote communities in eastern Washington. Pomeroy actually holds an important historical role. It developed in the late 19th century as a trade center for farmers and ranchers across Garfield County and later became the county seat of the region. However, like many small towns in the Palouse area, Pomeroy's economy relies heavily on wheat farming and ranching. As agriculture has become increasingly mechanized and requires fewer workers, the town's population has begun to stagnate. Many younger residents choose to leave for larger cities in search of more diverse job opportunities. Not far from the Washington-Oregon border, in the Green Valley along the Tucannon River, stands the small town of Dayton. With a population of about 2,400 residents, Dayton actually appears more lively than many other remote towns in eastern Washington. Dayton also has an interesting history. The town grew rapidly in the late 19th century as a center for agricultural trade and transportation in Columbia County. One of its most famous landmarks, the Columbia County Courthouse, was built in 1887 and still stands today as one of the oldest continuously used courthouses in the state. Yet behind its historic charm, Dayton still faces economic limitations. Most local activity continues to rely on wheat farming, ranching, and a handful of small businesses in the downtown area. Traveling north to Rosalia brings us back to the reality shared by many small towns in the Palouse region: quiet, remote, and slowly shrinking. With a population of around 550 residents, Rosalia sits among the wide rolling wheat hills that define the Palouse landscape in Washington. Like many towns in the region, Rosalia developed in the late 19th century when railroad lines helped farmers ship their crops to larger markets. At the time, the town had a small but active commercial center serving the surrounding agricultural communities. But as farming became more mechanized and required fewer workers, the town's population began to stagnate. Today, Rosalia's economy still depends almost entirely on agriculture and a few small local businesses. The median household income is around $45,000 per year, lower than the state average. Palouse is a town with a population of about 1,000 residents, slightly larger than many rural communities in eastern Washington, yet it still feels remote and far from the major economic centers of the state. Palouse grew in the late 19th century as wheat farming expanded rapidly across the region. The town became an important trading point for nearby farmers, with grain warehouses, stores, and transportation routes connecting harvests to larger markets. For a time, Palouse thrived as a community hub for the surrounding agricultural area. But over time, the same challenges seen across many rural towns began to appear. Mechanization reduced the need for farm labor, while many younger residents moved to larger cities in search of broader job opportunities. Oakesdale presents a very similar picture, a small town that continues to survive, but with increasingly limited room for growth. Located among the wide rolling hills of the Palouse region in Washington, Oakesdale has about 400 residents, making it one of the small communities that depend heavily on a rural agricultural economy. But like many farming towns in this region, agricultural modernization changed everything. Machines replaced much of the manual labor, and younger generations began leaving the town in search of opportunities in larger cities. Today, the median household income sits at around $43,000 per year, still well below the Washington state average. From Oakesdale, there is Tekoa. With a population of about 800 residents, the town is slightly larger than some rural communities nearby. However, that size does not always mean stronger economic conditions in the remote areas of Washington. In the early 20th century, Tekoa was once a fairly busy town in the region. Its strategic location made it an important stop along railroad routes transporting peas and lentils from the Palouse fields to larger markets. Grain storage warehouses and transportation activity once kept Tekoa's downtown lively. But as railroads became less central and agriculture grew more mechanized, the town's economic activity also declined. Many small businesses closed, and some younger residents left to search for work elsewhere. Washtucna offers a very different landscape. This small town lies in the dry Columbia Plateau region of Washington. With a population of only about 200 residents, Washtucna is one of the most remote small communities in eastern Washington. The town developed in the late 19th century when railroad lines crossed the region, helping farmers ship wheat from inland areas to larger markets. But as transportation systems changed and agriculture became more mechanized, the demand for labor dropped sharply. Many young residents left the town, and local economic activity gradually declined. Economically, the town also faces significant limitations. The median household income sits at around $39,000 per year,